All right, we're going to welcome everybody. So we want to welcome everybody to workshop session 8A, which is attachment and identity in interracial adoption and how the adoptee and family are impacted. And in this workshop, we're going to hear from Elizabeth Studwell. So before I begin, I'll introduce myself. I'm Renee Heddick, and I'm the lead AGAPE director, which is a post-adoption support program here at the Coalition. And I will be the monitor of the Zoom room today. Also know that I am an adoptive parent of 5 children, all transracially from 3 different countries. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Elizabeth. I also want to remind everybody that training certificates are available. I will put in the chat box the link to request those certificates. I will also put in the chat box a link to our fundraising book table, so please visit that. And of course, our conference workshop evaluations. During this time, Elizabeth would love to see everyone's faces, but if you don't feel comfortable going on screen, we certainly will respect that. As you have questions along the presentation, I would ask that you put them into the chat room, and I will be reviewing them and giving them to Elizabeth as the presentation moves forward. I would like to have an opportunity to introduce Elizabeth. She was adopted from Colombia. Elizabeth is a licensed clinical psychologist, specializing in working with children, adolescents, and families from an attachment-based lens. She has specialized in the area of adoption and foster care and attachment work for over 7 years and has worked in the foster care system in 2 countries. As a transracial adoptee, she's been presenting on the topic of transracial adoption for close to 13 years. She presented at the North American Council on Adoptable Children Conference in Atlanta in 2018. She has been asked to present to the Didactic Developmental Psychotherapy International Board and to the various international trainers of DDP to help increase racial awareness and awareness of intersection identity. So we're absolutely thrilled to have her. And Elizabeth, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to have you be my monitor, and thank you for sharing a little piece of your identity here too. So I appreciate that. That was a wonderful presentation. It's hard to believe I've been doing this for that long. It somehow doesn't seem like it. So yeah, my name is Elizabeth Studwell. You'll hear more about my name in just a moment. I am a clinical psychologist. I work at Reneke & Associates. And I'm also a facilitator at the All Adoption Mentorship organization, All Together Now, in case people have heard of that, I think. Yeah, hopefully we'll be back in person soon. So welcome everyone. Let's just keep going. I'd love for this to be a bit more interactive. If people are comfortable turning their videos on, I would love that. Again, if not, that's fine too, but please do write in the chat. I think Renee is going to be able to help me read through questions, and I'd love for this to just be a bit more interactive. I feel like people get more out of it, and I'm happy to answer any and all questions. So let's get going. Yeah, so attachment and identity and transracial adoption. In my opinion, 2 of the major components in adoption, identity and attachment are just such key fundamental pieces in my experience. And then I come from that perspective of, and now it's not letting me change slides. Let's see, let's try this. There we go. So I said I would mention more about my name. I have an interesting dual name, as a lot of adoptees do. I was born Maria del Rosario Andrade, and I have lived Elizabeth Margaret Studwell. So I feel like that's just a good place to start, of just like how discreet that really is. And I will apologize in advance. You are all on this screen, as is my video, and the other screen I will be looking at too. So maybe down also. So my apologies in advance for that. But yeah, so it's certainly been a journey, my own and many others along the way. So I was born in Bogota, the capital of Colombia. I found out my birth family is from a smaller town further south in the country called Neva. I grew up, I was adopted to a Caucasian family. This is my mother here that you're looking at in the picture. So I grew up in Evanston, Illinois. I was adopted at 3 months old. I do have an older brother who's also adopted from the same orphanage in Colombia, La Casa de la Madre y el Niño. And it was a closed adoption, as many were in the 80s, and international, obviously. And so before the Hague Agreement, children had to come to the United States and get naturalized. So I didn't become a citizen until age 2. I think over the years, you've heard more about different parents maybe not necessarily getting citizenship and that becoming really complicated for children later in life as adults. So it's interesting. I think many adoptees, maybe even all, have 2 birth certificates. Many have different parts of their names. Some parents have kept their names, some parents have fully changed names, but I find that name really, there's something really significant about 2 very, very distinct names. I've loved that more and more families have really kept at least first names, part of first names. A last name often shifts, but that's something to really be talked about, especially if we're talking about children who have gone through that foster care system. Some might choose to change their last name, some might not, and that's a whole discussion to have. But that's kind of like, when you think of just a name, it's kind of a bedrock. So I just name that to, ground people in, I don't know, kind of how it's been really disorienting at times. So one piece is being, a transracial adoptee and having your own pieces that you bring. But the other piece is, if it is a family with 2 parents, each parent brings their own set of identities, their own background, their own history, right? I happen to have parents who maybe seemingly are quite similar in some ways, but also come from really different backgrounds. So English, Eastern European, Methodist, Jewish, lawyer, therapist, like a very straight mind, judgment thinker, and a very open, very different kind of processy thinker mom. So there's some good Jewish guilt, but also some not talking about things from the other side too. That's been interesting over the years. So this is just a picture. That's my brother, who is almost 4 years older than me, also adopted, I mentioned. And this is me. I'll just mention here that I do look like I'm in a jungle. I'm kind of in a jungle. That is in Colombia. When Renee mentioned in my bio that I had worked in 2 different country systems, I did, just after finishing all my doctoral training and passing each key, I bought a one-way ticket to Colombia. I figured I was sick of tired of studying too much psychology and memorizing everything, and really needed to learn Spanish. Now, my Spanish still has a long way to go, and I was much more fluent when I was living there, but I did end up living and working there for a year, and I worked at my orphanage. I volunteered for about 6 months, and then I ended up being hired as a clinical psychologist there. And it was about 100, 120 children there at any given time. Only about 10% were maybe available for adoption. So very much a foster care placement, temporary and longer term. But this is me in a beautiful spot that just felt so much like me being in my country. And it was just really powerful to go back and to be there. And hard work in their system too. Very different mindset, very different views, very different perceptions on what to share with parents and what not to. So if people have questions around that, happy to talk that one through. I don't know, maybe I'll do a check-in. Any questions as of yet, or you'll let me know, Renee?
You're good so far.
Okay, so here we are, just getting into kind of some of the bigger pieces, like, race, ethnicity, cultural, just everybody knows these dynamics, but just to get on the same page of what they are and how they're different, why it matters so much. Why does it matter? And then how I want to, maybe I'll mention here, if everybody can get at some point in the next 5-10 minutes, something to write with and a pad of paper, because I do have an experiential exercise that is, I think, maybe the most important of the presentation. There's a lot of information, but it's really just trying to get an experience. Looks like something is writing on this. I don't know. Can people see those little lines? I don't know what that is. It's all right. Sorry if that was me. So just to get us on the same page here, race is a social construct. It's formed purely to create a social hierarchy and inequality based on arbitrary traits, right? This is a social construct. It's not real. Whereas ethnicity is a sense of peoplehood based in ancestry, history, and similarity that share common culture, religion, language, tradition, etc. Right? Race is just, this larger, we all kind of believe in it and walk through the world knowing it, but really, I think hopefully more and more we're deconstructing that to know that isn't a thing that's arbitrary. There's more difference within groups as there is comparative between groups. So it's just to get on that page. And culture is much larger. Culture is an abstract concept, diverse, dynamic, changing. It's a different standard for perceiving, believing, evaluating, and acting. It's like a way of kind of seeing the world, right? So we'll get into that a little bit more. Here you go. I wonder if that was me. I don't know how to erase those little lines. Whatever.
It wasn't you, but can I tell you how to fix it?
Sure, you're welcome to tell me.
If you go up to view, do you have a view options on the top of your screen?
I have annotate.
Yep. Okay. So hit annotate.
Oh, and I can erase.
You should be able to erase or hit the clear as the host.
Is there a clear? There is a clear. Here are all drawings. Okay.
There you go.
Thank you. All right, and now I can close this. All right. That would have just irked me. All right, so here we are. You've probably seen many different identity wheels. I created this one of just kind of like the maybe most significant in my opinion, and many others. So race, ethnicity, beliefs, sexual orientation, gender, age, physical, mental ability, whether that's, vision impairment, hearing difficulties, fine motor skills, learning disabilities, like paraplegic, any sort of physical disability, size, etc., socioeconomic level, and your name. So adoptees don't actually have equal rights or knowledge or exposure to their, race is more complicated, culture, ethnicity, religion, or heritage. So it's just not equal exposure. So it takes a little bit of, we figure it out different ways. One of which is just what we have access to, right? We see ourselves in the mirror and people see us. So what we can see is the visual piece, right? Maybe race, if one wanted to, you call it that piece, right? We can see what we look like, but it's much more about how people respond to us in the world. It's how do our parents react to us? What do they show us who we are, right? How do friends and family respond to us? How are we treated in these contexts? But then just acquaintances, and then just walking through the world. And it can be very different at different developmental levels, stages in the child's life, right? So it's quite different if we're talking about a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old versus an 8, 10, 11, 12, 15, or 25-year-old, right? How much are you with your parent? How much are you not? This is a good moment to name. You obviously saw my parents, they're white family. I am primarily talking about a bit more of a traditional, Caucasian parents, transracial children. But this can go in all different ways, right? There's plenty of families who can be, you know, all the same race, or like similar appearance, but can actually have quite different backgrounds, right? Some people will be able to know in one family that there are quite different backgrounds, right? You can be Black Hispanic, Black Caribbean, Black American, right? Well, that's complicated too, but all the different kind of African American, and those are all quite different in different cultures. And so it can, there's what's seeable and what's not always so seeable. But you know, all of these pieces, it's really about how do we slow down to think through these pieces and help our kids be able to grapple with it, right? Make some meaning out of it. How do we help kids make sense of all this confusion? I think that's where I come down on. And then different societal structures. So we'll take a look again, let's see. Because it would be different if you are a transracially adopted child family in America versus if you live in Italy or Sweden or Colombia, right? Or any other country for that matter. It's different. So I'll just say this briefly. I think hopefully we're now well aware that we can't just kind of glaze over and just make everything nice and pretty and perfect like nobody sees anything. I really can't be colorblind. And I will say, like, I think there were quite a lot of adoption agencies that, you know, historically really just said, just love them, you know, and just treat them exactly as, you know, everything, you know, just nothing is different and it'll all be great. You know, they just need love. And I'll say internationally, people are still here. I can't speak for everywhere, obviously. But different countries are in different places. And I will say in my experience in Latin America and Colombia, this was not well aware of. And so much more traditional perspective. And if you adopt an older child internationally, that child will likely have integrated or verbally heard, well, once you get a family, everything's going to work out. Don't you want parents? You know, so it's, and they're supposed to get a choice. I won't go down that rabbit hole, but I think hopefully we're in a place where we're really thinking about how to make difference talkable, right? To manage it. This is a family of a close friend of mine, and I wonder, I don't know where we are on questions again. I'm imagining if you didn't pause me, maybe there aren't yet. But I want to welcome in a few questions. And maybe I will keep going a little bit. Maybe we'll get to the exercise and we'll come back. But you know, just to kind of think about a few terms here of like, what is enculturation? How does this, this is learning that takes place without direct teaching. So this is kind of some of that, you know, a lot of families won't have taught, you know, how do we be in the world, right? That's, how do you sit down and really explain all of these pieces, right? A lot of this learning, it goes without any words, with just, they watch, they see everything. Always. I always am telling people, like, you know, and I know parents know it because they see it when it happens, but it's, you know, they know so much more than we think they do, but they can't always make sense of it. So sometimes there's some benefit in really, like, how do we make some of the implicit explicit? So that is, you know, something to kind of name. So enculturation is that learning. We'll come back to that. Socialization is a bit more deliberately taught. You know, it might be even especially taught, like, let's say you might have a child who has FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome, or autism is on the ASD spectrum, then you're going to do, you know, much more literal social training. But there's still, right, make sure you pick up your dishes, don't leave your clothes on the floor, do this, we have to clean up our room, it's time to do, so that's some of the like deliberate teaching, no, it's not okay to like not look before you go across the street, there's a lot of that, but that piece is a little bit more general. We're kind of talking more about the implicit learning.
I'll send the light. Let me just get through this. I am trying, but you're disturbing me.
Maybe I don't know if I knew who that was, but I took an educated guess, let's say. So it's interesting to know that one of the resiliencies is mothers' increase in enculturation leads to ethnic identity affirmation. So this is kind of complicated, and I'll come back to it because, there's kind of a grounding can be really, really different. But sometimes even groundedness in your own cultural heritage can be a spot from which to navigate others. And that can be its own, grounding point, and just kind of like being able to talk about and be aware of where you stand and have that also become, right? It's an integration. So this I've not seen used very often in adoption, because this is really specifically designed. Barry's acculturational model is really designed for with immigration in mind. But it's interesting because I think it really applies. Transracial adoptees are they're not, but it's helpful to see through this kind of acculturation model because, first off, for example, I'm an immigrant, even though in some ways I'm also kind of not, but there are different ways, and there's different ways to kind of navigate this, and anywhere on this whole spectrum, but this is a simplified kind of, do you kind of separate out? Do you kind of stay fully within your culture? Do you fully integrate and assimilate into the larger societal culture? Or do you kind of marginalize and not integrate? Or do you like find an integration of the two, right? And kind of research shows if you can find some integration, that it's so important to hold on to your own identity, right? Culture, ethnicity, but also there's a way in which to feel kind of a part of the society. How do you have a little bit of a give and take, a little bit of both? You can make your new world feel like home too. And it can be, of course, very different when we're talking about different ages of adoption, right? The difference between an infant adoption, right? One direction is going to be a lot harder, but if you're adopting a much older child, they come with a whole history of experiences in connection to their culture. Well, sometimes yes, and sometimes no. I think more in the foster care system, a child could be in many different placements with many different backgrounds, many different heritages, like many different cultures, many different food types, many different like ways of doing everything. And let's just imagine, right? In some ways, I'm talking about some of the most, maybe some of my experience is some of the most simplistic. So just keep adding layers to this, right? If you've made so many transitions that you've had to integrate so many different kind of identities or ways of being, it gets really complicated and confusing. And who am I becomes really hard to find. And that question of who am I is just so deeply ingrained in us as humans that, most people are asking themselves, children, adults, whether they will speak about it or not, right? And different kids are on different pathways of how much or how little they'll talk about different things. But sometimes it's just opening up, hey, I'm thinking about it too. I'm thinking about it too. Yeah. Oh.
So Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, we actually have a question related to that. The question is, family states, we fostered a young lady who was born in Guatemala and brought to the US when she was 7. When she first came to our care, I wanted to make her feel comfortable in our home and tried to learn about foods that she enjoyed from her birth country. At first, she resisted the connection. Oops, I lost, hold on. Okay, at first she resisted the connection, just wanted American food, but she was older. How do we approach embracing culture without seeming too eager, clumsy, or offended? It seems like we felt a little offended, which was the opposite of my intention.
Right, right. No, that's, it's interesting because every kid is really different on this one and kind of what they're open to and what they're not. And I think there's a way in which that want to fit in can be really, really deep. And it can almost become scary to not be doing the American way, to not be working to fit in, because I don't know the history of this child, but again, imagine, it's sometimes seemingly small things can actually be like really big to the point of almost life or death for the child. Like they don't know that, they're not saying that, they're not communicating that. But this kind of, it's a sense of safety. It's how do I find safety? And so sometimes when we're, wanting to provide this connection to their heritage, they're like, depending on their history, that might have been a scary place. That might have been a place where they don't want to have anything to do with. What's complicated is how do we kind of celebrate some pieces of it with how can we make, because their experience does not represent the whole country. Their experience doesn't represent all of what that country stands for and what it can be, and how, because we want to change that narrative of, kind of finding some pride in where they're from. And so I think it can be done, and sometimes food might, it's about finding what it might be for that child. If it's not food, it's not food. If it's, you're welcome to eat whatever you want. We love this food. We're going to have some of it. Kids can have this, parents can have this. Maybe that's a way to just normalize it and just say, this is delicious. We love it. It's okay. You don't have to have it. You love French fries. Great. But it can also be, hey, I saw this, piece of information. I saw this picture from Guatemala. Look at this countryside. Look how beautiful that is. Wow, no, I don't want to look at that. Okay. Finding those littler ways, creating opportunity to be in community, in person. Who are role models? We'll kind of get into this more, but that's it's a really good question, because every child goes through their own phase of what they're open to and not. So here we are. I think this is a moment to get out that piece of paper if you're able, and, create your own identity wheel. Write your name, and if your name is complicated, write all of what represents you. Right? I'm just going to give you 1 minute, and I'm also going to turn this AC down. I'm already cold. Hold on. For those of you off screen, I would really encourage you giving this a try too. It's a really interesting, I just think it's, and you may have done this elsewhere, but it's just an interesting, experience to try, because what I'm really wanting to get at is help you feel that internal experience of what it's like when so many, well, I'll keep going, but where this might be going. That change happens. All right, so are we good? Is that enough time? All right, got a couple thumbs up. I'll take it. So now let's take a look. So hold on to that for a second. which ones of these do you imagine changes when a child, is placed in a new placement or when they get adopted? What changes? What doesn't?
Some beliefs change, or two comments so far. Socioeconomic levels change.
Mm-hmm.
Beliefs, socioeconomic, name, socioeconomic, seems to be a theme. Identity as a family member,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
orientation, physical, mental ability.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
New ethnicities are added in a way.
Yeah. A lot of good thoughts there.
Racial identity confusion, name, identity, beliefs.
All right. So these are maybe some of the most common ones that I'm hearing. So good job, everyone. That was literally right. And even someone got the physical, mental abilities, right? Because we are maybe then exposed to significantly more resources. Somebody maybe could get more access to tutoring for a learning disability, to physical therapy, occupational therapy, to surgeries for hearing loss or vision loss, or just different, prosthetics. I mean, all of those different pieces, right? And then your ability to function in that, in the world changes. So all of these pieces, I think people named many of these. So great. Now, why don't we take a moment? I'll keep going. I gotta use this button. All right. Now here we are with these things. Do we think any of these four change? I am looking at the chat now, so I'll do a little, but I'd love for you to keep reading. Oop, Renee, you might be muted.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Age could change. Age order, so it's a sibling order.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Age change if the records are inaccurate or incomplete.
Who said that one? Yeah.
It's a question about sexual orientation, a question about gender identity.
Yeah. No, I think you're really, really thinking a lot here. These are, sibling order can be really big change in terms of identity, right? Just imagine if, that's a huge one. But I think what people are starting to get at, and age can change, which it seems odd because once again, these are the things that kind of don't parse out, right? We have 2 birth certificates. We weren't born twice. You're really only born once, right? We have 2 birth certificates, 2 names, 2 sets of parents. Like, that's confusing. But in different cultures, age is tracked different ways, right? I think it's in Korea, for example, in South Korea, everybody turns the next year old on January 1st. So you can actually be a very different age than the age you would be, right? If you're December versus if you're January, that's a huge difference, actually. But again, people are naming, some people actually won't ever know their birthday. Sometimes people don't even know the year in which they were born, right? That's complicated. So it can change. And the ways in which gender, sexual orientation, and race, in fact, change is when you are switching societies, when you switch countries, even sometimes going from the South to the North or the West Coast to the Midwest, right? So even domestic in some ways, how people, the general public, and that family, right? Because each family has a culture, our town might have a culture, or a neighborhood as a culture, right? The different levels of you know, just our cultures can shift. So one place you might live in a very, you know, you might come from a very traditional Catholic country, where if your sexual orientation, if you identify as LGBTQ plus, that could be seen in a really negative way. Or you could move to another place where that might be welcomed, accepted, encouraged, fostered, right? And that's a huge difference in your life trajectory, right? Whether these various parts of you are accepted or not. And that can be true, right? If you come from a country where you are, you know, it's 90% people from that country, right? Like in Colombia, it's mostly Colombians, like almost everybody is Colombian. Korea, China, like these many other countries are not like the US. And you really can walk around and I'll never forget, like you just are there and you're like, I just fit in. I'm part of the dominant, you know, culture here. I can just be, oh, wow. Here I can't, especially in a lot of white worlds, right? I can't. And so that feels really different. All of a sudden, you know, that kind of my visual appearance race becomes much more identifying feature of me. Whereas if I had stayed in Colombia, it really wouldn't. It wouldn't be anything. That would be really low on the list of identities, right? So now here, I want to check in. I think people are adding some good thoughts. So we'll come back to those if you want to take a note of those, some good comments. But let's see. So I want everybody now, I'm going to go back actually to this one. I want everybody to choose another country. Any other country. Choose maybe a country that starts with the same letter as your first name. So it's super random. So this is kind of follow up. Now make a new identity wheel. Choose another country. I don't know if I see names. Let's see. Croatia, I could see for C, or Jamaica, we've got J. I don't know. What do we got? Norway, Ethiopia, any other country. Now take that country and Peru, Brazil, Japan, Greece, excellent. And go through your identity wheel again, right? If you had grown up in that country, what would that have been like for you? What is most likely, right? If you had been adopted to that country, so your parent wasn't able to raise you, you're in America, and you were adopted to this other country. What might that common lifestyle look like? What would your belief system be? Right. Religion and otherwise. What ethnicity would you have? How would your sexual orientation be observed or be, you know, how would that be treated? What would it be to be your gender in that country? How is it to be female in that country? What does it mean to be a male? Or what would it mean to be transgender there? That's how you identify. What would your physical, mental, right, challenges be there? You know, those of you who maybe had different learning disabilities or ADHD or a little hard time, you know, fitting in with whatever it was, right? We all have our histories. And age, if you know that country's way of tracking age, by all means, I can't say that I would know everywhere. How would you likely be socioeconomically? Would you have what you have now? Would you have more? Would you have less? Maybe it would be hard to know. And then how would it be to be your race in that country? How different would you be from that community? How might you be treated? So Renee, I wonder if you could, just while people are finishing up, where we might be on the chat.
So a lot of significant differences, lifestyle, you know, ethnic differences, socioeconomic differences. Everybody's agreeing that it would be extremely difficult to make that transition.
Right. And then if we're thinking about this, right, stay with this feeling right here of just difference, right? It's hard to know better or worse. Like, let's kind of let ourselves not go too far down any judgment. But then the question becomes, let me get there. If you change, right, the things that we said for sure would change, and probably more, would you still be you if you changed at least 60%? Who are you then? Oof. That's kind of confusing. And here we are talking about young kids. Just trying to be kids. All kids have to figure out who they are, right? Even if everything's nice and smooth and easy and you stay with your biological parents and you grow up, kids flail all over the place. Who am I? Where do I belong? What am I doing? Where do I go? Like, what kind of kid am I, right? Who kind of person am I, right? We didn't even talk about any of that, those pieces, right? What am I good at? Am I good at anything, right? But just thinking about what it's like on the inside to have like distinct awareness of the possibility of two identities or more. So a lot of kids think like, well, I kind of randomly ended up in this household. I could have been anywhere. Yeah. And then, gosh, if you add in, you know, a kid who's been in 5 homes or more, oh, right. And then it becomes not so hard anymore to think about why they would want to hold on to their birth family, no matter what happened back there. Because that's where I come from. Right? There's something about that groundedness, right? And I think being adopted pulls out the groundedness from underneath your feet. Now, there's a lot of resiliency and there's a lot, you know, and maybe I'll pause any discussion here or any questions here just to, you know, I don't know if anybody wants to raise their hand or we're just feeling like keep going because I have plenty more than I'm probably quite behind already.
Yeah, we have a lot of agreement with your statements and just a wonderful way to look at it through a new lens. So that was great. I do know there was a question, as the children get older, there's more interest in the origins. So that's a question. And related to that, as our kids get older, they don't feel they fit anywhere. They don't feel they fit in their adopted culture. They don't fit, they feel that they fit in their original culture. So just questions about that.
Yeah, no, I think those are excellent, excellent questions. And, I don't know, maybe the answer is just yes. It's, yeah, I think it is more and more common as kids get older to be more curious. You can maybe get a little braver. You maybe have been confronted with it more. You're maybe less spending time with your parents. So you're out in the world and people respond to you in that way, right? And I think there is that sense of we're never quite going to be either. You're actually never quite going to be either. And sometimes it's really stinking painful to sit with, like, I'm not really either. And everybody navigates that differently. But I can say there's a lot of resiliency. There's a lot of, how do I search for some of this so I can be a both and, as opposed to neither or nor, right? How can I be both? How can I come to a deeper sense of acceptance for, listen, these are some things that are really positives. These are some things I gained. These are some things I lost. I think it becomes so much more challenging. I'm seeing a lot more kids get to that place when they're getting to that next developmental stage, like cognitive stage of 6, 7, 8, 9. And that's a young age to really be grappling with deep, like, who am I? Where do I belong? What am I worth? Right? And that's when we get into the much more kind of severe, do I belong anywhere? Do I belong anywhere in this world? And that's hard to really hold, but it is, how do we be their rock as they grapple with this? Because it really is rather existential, right? And how can we tame our, like, parental anxiety about, oh, if they go out there, if they leave, they won't come back. You gotta trust. They will come back. They will come back. If you have had that connection and created that relationship, right? It is part of the loving, that, like, letting them go. And letting them go sometimes means, like, sleepaway camp, right? Or like that cultural camp, or that, right? Sometimes it's much, much smaller, but just letting them explore and be different than you, because they are, and embrace those differences. Yeah. Close this. So these are, these are just some things, and I want kind of questions. If questions keep coming up, I'm happy to answer them. I'll keep going through so you can see them even as I'm answering questions. But reinculturation, right? This is the reclaiming of our birth, culture, and heritage. How do we reclaim, right? And it takes a lot of effort, right? It really is work. And I think, it's important for parents to be on board with this. Now, it's complicated and hard because a lot of kids don't want it. A lot of kids are like, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to think about it. I'm not ready for that. That's okay too. Obviously, we want to go at the child's pace. They give us a lot of information, but I will say, and I've been watching some of the other presentations, and somebody else said it really well, of just like, loss of language is huge. And it's a tough one because it's also not so easy to relearn a language, or to learn a language in the first place. If you were adopted pre-verbal, right, or little and you've forgotten it, that's tough. But if there are some natural ways to expose kids to it, if there are some ways to have sitters, if there are some ways to have, like, this is just what our family does. We all do this. We all go to these events. We have close friends who, we're all working on learning this. We're all not letting this go. Even if they're just hearing some of it, even if there's, like different exposures to food or culture. And sometimes it's just going to events, even if we can't get, do all the things ourselves. But, sometimes it's joining churches. Sometimes it's being a part of a community and finding that. And sometimes kids do that older on their own, but I will say that's what I've done, but it's hard. And it's hard to keep it up if you don't have some support. Yeah, I mean, these are the complex layers. This is where it gets confusing, and each child really has their own, right? I think being native, wherever you might be, but part of your native community is extra complicated. Certainly in this country, like there's all sorts of history around, adoption in native tribes, but I imagine it would be, it's similarly complex no matter what country, and everybody's different percentages of different things. And so it's complicated. I would say I can kind of connect to that. When I did my DNA testing, I am 51% Spanish from Spain. And it was kind of a little existential, like, wait, should I be learning Spanish from Spain? Like, what country am I really from? But really that's so deeply, deeply historical. And non-adoptees don't necessarily, you don't change who you are if you find out the DNA. Like sometimes that can be helpful to find out, and it's interesting. But when you find out, oh, I'm part from here, I'm part from there, you don't have to change who you are, right? That just becomes a new thing you can add onto. And so I wonder for her, she is Latin American. She is, right? That's a part of where she will always be from, no matter what percentage of indigenous she is. Both are true. You are indigenous and from Central America. And so I think letting her find, she will have, it is our burden. It ultimately is our burden, and there's no kind of fully undoing that for kids. But it's, how do parents hold, my child has this burden and always will, and I have to be okay with that, and I want to be a rock for them while they go on this journey, and I want to be right there. But I don't have to, you don't have to have all the answers. There isn't one right answer to that. I love that term that you identified, and there isn't, she's exactly who she is. And it's more around, how do we foster, how do we support the exploration of wherever they want to be, and when they're ready and how they want to do it. Yeah, so maybe just giving a little space for all of you as parents to kind of listen. You don't have to be perfect, and you can be different, and that's just okay, and that's part of it. Yeah.
Thanks.
I'd
also just love to add that she has no interest in going to Guatemala, and I'm glad that she knew herself well enough at the time that I was ready to take her at 12, as I had taken my son. And because had she not known enough to say it or said it, even if she knew, I would have brought her there, and she didn't want to go, and she still doesn't want to go.
Yeah. And every child is really different. I know some tiny little kids, I want to go, right? And everybody's a bit different. And sometimes it's, how do we, how can there be a vacation before we're going and finding, our whole birth family, or searching, right? Just to see the country, just to see. But yeah, if she's not ready to go, she's not ready to go. Yeah.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That's great insight. I just want to let you know you have 5 minutes remaining, just so you can judge your time.
I appreciate that. We didn't quite get to. I'm going to skip this part. So we'll go through a little quickly. But right here, we're talking about this already. Just being open just asking the questions, just naming it. How do we shift our expectations, right? Maybe open up our expectations, register what we imagined it would be like as adoptive parents, as foster parents, and then allow for difference, right? How do you regulate? How is it? Because it is different than, it's usually different than what you expect. And each child needs to be parented in their own way. And that's its own piece to kind of fully sit with, right? So where are you on your introspection, on your level of awareness, right? On what are you reading? What are you viewing? What music, what shows, what are you exposing to? That mindset, right? What are the kind of that acceptance of differences and the open communication and comfort with talking about hard topics, right? That's, I think, some of the biggest pieces. So this is a longer list of kind of how do we, right? But focusing in on those direct lived experiences, providing the direct connection and lived experiences with individuals of similar background is probably the single most helpful experience available, right? How do we just immerse ourselves sometimes, right? How do you have role models who look like your child? How do you, teachers, doctors, other people's parents, peers, yeah, just kind of go through these a little bit more quickly, right? Music, food, culture, holidays, right? How else? One of my close friends adopted to Sweden from Colombia, from my same orphanage. I met him when I was living there. I met a number of close friends. His family just very small, but they always, every single birthday, always had Colombian flags. There was always a mark of like, this is where you're from, this is who you are. It's not huge, but this is just always, and sometimes starting really early, right? Like, this is just what we do. This is just a part of who we are, and we celebrate that. And I don't think I don't love the gotcha day, right? At least we could say family day or, your special day, but it comes with some loss that day. So just having some openness around that. But just a lot more like, how do we know little things? And, where do we kind of stand with, professionals, learning traditions, proverbs, even if they're fully translated, right? Like books, hair products, how are we actually becoming aware? Because kids have all different backgrounds. They just need individual kind of care. They do. How are we extending ourselves? Because gosh, isn't it tough? Like the difference between, straight blonde hair and hair, right? That's much thicker, or coarser, or curlier, or bigger. And that's a real piece. And when parents don't learn that and go out of their way and be uncomfortable in a salon where like, oh, what's happening in that family? Well, right? Parents are the ones who chose, right? You made the choice, and it's bigger than just you. So yeah, sometimes it does take being a little uncomfortable. But I think also going to, and I'm gonna check, I was told we could be a few minutes over, that the room doesn't quite close exactly. Okay, so I might keep scanning through to just get through some of the information. And I'm almost there, but to get through, and then I probably have like 10 minutes after this or something for questions.
Yes. Yeah, you can go a little bit. Claudia will come in and stop you dead if she needs to.
All right, will do. So these are the pieces, and when we're talking about attachment, right? So we did quite a lot on identity, but the attachment piece is the grounding piece. The attachment piece is, how do we keep them tethered to you? Right? You are their person. You are, their guiding force. Even if you're a foster parent, you are their parent for that period of time, and then hopefully forever moving forward, if that's possible. And how do you give them that sense of security? How can you help them know that with all their differences, with all the challenges, right, you're still right there. You will be there no matter what, right? And regulating your insides when they come in with big feelings and big challenges, right? So how do we keep things a little bit more predictable? How do we help manage stress situations? How are you, right, managing your stress? How do you, what is the right amount to do? How do you, and maybe it's support, and how do, sometimes it really, really does just take a village. And do you need to be somewhere where you're closer to family? Do you need to be like, where are we going to be more regulated so kids can stay regulated? Right? And that attunement and the empathy, right? How do we work towards not fixing the problem? You cannot ever find, there is no perfect identity to search out from anywhere, right? How do we just sit with, sweetie, must be really, really hard to not know. Yeah, it's just really hard. It's so much more confusing for you. It's just more complex for you than it is for most other people. It just is. Yeah. And they can feel that, right? Right, because it's more about doing that. You can see them kind of get working up. What's going on? What's going on? Can we get curious about this? You know what, my dear, you're not usually this upset about things. I wonder, could it be this? Could it be this? Oh, is it something linked to adoption? Is it something linked to birth family? Maybe, right? So how do we help them sit with it and just say, this is hard stuff. This is hard, hard stuff, right? How do we use that to help them see, like, they're not alone too. They're not alone in it. I'm right here with it. We're going to figure this out together. Yeah. Let's see. So these are a couple, right? Just some things to help in general, calm the nervous system a little bit. Just what are the soothing things? Just using a little that neuroscience background of like anything repetitive, anything like if you can just go on more walks, right? Just kind of getting outside, more walks, running, repetitive movement, rhythmic, right? Drums, swimming, music, just like, even, I don't think I have on here, but like good smells, right? Just calming smells sometimes in the house, for everybody. Sometimes it's like, this isn't for you, my dear. Like, I need this smell. Like, I just need a little bit of, I need to check in just to really like let the body get some soothing in there. Yeah, rituals, family rituals of like every night, this is just what we do, just like hanging in there. Stuffed animals, dogs. If you're open to having a bigger, calming, 100% loving dog, right? Oh, so therapeutic. Such a grounding force of just this like animal life to just like be in it with them. Yeah, meditation, regulation. Meditation can look like the 2 minutes to slow down and take the deep breathing, but every night before bed, right? And just some consistency. Let's just slow down. You know what? Today's a new day. Tomorrow's a new day. Every new day is a new opportunity, right? Life book, that one, if a kid is asking a lot of questions, if kids are really thinking about it and they're open to it, how do we show them where they're from? How do we explore together? How do we go online and kind of like figure out what do we know about this country? What can we explore? What do we know about this part of the country, right? What do we know about, this culture or this community? Let's see what we can find out. Let's just explore together. And then just deep parent support. I think I will wrap up there and leave this on and just open to a few questions now. I don't know if we have any questions here or.
I just want to make a statement that I will forever take this little Post-it with me with the little wheel on it. I know that it seems so simplistic at thought, but it really, I'm going to take that with me and start. It was just amazing. Just something so simple could just be turned right on its head, and it changes the entire perspective. And I want to thank you for that. I will keep this Post-it right here.
Thank you. Yeah, it really is a unique dynamic that takes place. Yeah.
So Elizabeth, there was really 2 comments more than questions. In the chat, one was, my daughter said to me, Mom, please don't take it personally. I do not want to change my name, but I wouldn't mind carrying your name. My reply to her was, that's okay. I want you to be identified by who you are.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah.
And the other comment, kids need the empowerment over own identity, even if it's to explore all their pieces and try it on.
Yeah.
It's one of those few things they have control over and can self-determine. They need support to do that work and the unconditional love for whoever they end up being.
Very well said. Yeah, absolutely. And they do try on all different things, right? And sometimes they'll try on, parents' identities and then try to find out kind of their identities. Sometimes it's the need to find their identity now, right? And every child is a little different on that journey, and openness to the flexibility as they walk through and find their pathway. Yeah. Kind of find something for them to ground themselves in. I am a person who, and sometimes is a runner, is a dancer, is a musician, is a singer, is a, at whatever level it might be, right? Or I'm a reader, or I'm a writer, or whatever, right? Those are the things. And sometimes you can be curious about, right? As parents, I wonder if that comes from your birth family. I wonder if that's just absolutely unique to you, but that's you, right? So there are things that you're helping them ground their identity in. You're helping them hold to, right? Just things that are innately theirs.